Hey, good coffee morning tubes. Neighbors, friends, associates, distant relatives, fellow hominids. I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to attach a video that is a prime candidate for a comedy video to be dubbed and made into a cartoon. But it's a mid 1960s video about a type of battery or energy source that us, the big US, mouse in my pocket, developed in the 60s. Now, it's a tedious listen because it keeps on going, connecting dots and things that you might not really understand to. But if you listen through it, this is what we were doing. It didn't talk to the radioactive portion of that battery. If you listen to it, it's about a battery, basically. Energy source for spacecraft. Nuclear batteries. RTGs, I believe, is one of the acronyms for it. So this is something we did back in the even 40s, 50s, and 60s. There's a long record of Soviets nuclear powered or radioactive powered it's semantics. So they used radioactive materials to make a battery, and they are still around. You can find them out there if you know where to go looking for these radioactive batteries from Russia. But most of them were collected up. There's a few items, but you can find the videos on them. And that was one of the tales of the Cold War. Those batteries escaped controls and got out into the general public. How many people were harmed by them? It's a good question. It's a good question. Which is what it's about all I've got is maybe a few good questions. So anyway, if you listen through the video, it's going through the science and the technology. I worked on a molten salt cooled reactor. That's how hot the pressure vessel was that made the plastic for 1/3 of the world back in a day. So little familiarity with molten salt cooling. The mercury cooling that they're using here, now they're using mercury like you would have Freon in your air conditioner, or like industrial or other air conditioners, or I'm sorry, refrigerators use, what do they use as a refrigerant? I want to say chlorine, but that's not it. Ammonia. Sorry. Commercial refrigerators use ammonia for cooling because of the characteristics of the phase change and energy transfers in that phase change and compressibility. So we know why. Anyway, back in the 60s, we were building those molten mercury reactors. That lab is a place I would have worked in. Something like that. That lab is a place I was in and out of, working on equipment they use to test what they're testing. That lab's little instruments with stickers from a calibration procedure with initials on it might have been my initials. So I might not have visited the lab, but now I am in what's called a chain of custody for the information that comes out of that lab because my initials are on one of the instruments. So, big circle. What I'm trying to point out is what we've been doing, what we still do. What you see in those pictures from the 60s has more computers, and we sample it faster. We learned some time ago that mercury is not good for human, or it's not good for our environment, our natural. It's not good for biological entities in too high a quantity. Remember this challenge of we haven't got absolutes here. If you get exposed, there's a chance that your lottery ticket will be a winner. This is what we're speaking to. This is what makes the conversation so hard. This is why global corporate structures will not let global studies happen. They divide and they conquer. They split us apart. They're using an understanding of nature itself, common to the whole planet, to give you some unfounded beliefs. That's a challenge that you kind of have to kick past. You can't let these videos intimidate or scare you. It's hard to sit and listen through if you're going, oh my God. We had a lab in one of the Air Command schools in Lowry Air Force Base that was shut down for over a week because someone broke a mercury manometer with a good volume of mercury in it. It spilled out across the counter, and now it's a vapor in the air. And that is mostly the concern. Huge amount, lots of vapors. If it's warm outside, it's worse. One of the reasons we don't use that mercury-filled idea is safety concerns. We found better materials than mercury to use, I believe. I don't, if it is being used, it is in minuscule amounts. It is a common element that goes into things, so could be there. So anyway, that video is really creepy weird. And the aspects they speak to in there, each one of them I can trace back to some math or the measurement instruments, the methodology, the procedures, the methods, the foundation of their understanding is documented somewhere back in a whole lot of books. So a side note to this is sitting through those things gives you, I want to say, 2 to 7 IQ points, because you're being introduced to concepts, and once you have seen those concepts, like you can use mercury to cool something, that's just a concept until you put it into action, until a scientist makes a device that he can hand over to engineers to integrate into a useful process, a useful system, a useful piece of information. If you go back, because of the instrument calibration training, I very much center on 2 words, 2 concepts from the measurement scientists. And these you use to understand what that test instrument you're using can tell you. Okay, it's what is being measured exactly. Exactly. If the meter's out, turned on measuring something, is it measuring background noise plus electricity? Is it measuring sunlight? Or is it a light affected instrument that you have to keep in the dark in order to use? Is there smoke in the air? What's the relative humidity in the lab if you're doing optics work? Do you worry about that? So all of these details come out of the previous work of somebody else. So IQ points. IQ simply is your exposure to concepts and ideas in the surrounding world. Just because you haven't seen it before doesn't mean it hasn't been there. Too long a video. Peace out. Stir-fry rice.